Oh, hello and welcome to What Are We Talking About with Jamie Jakes. I am him. And today I'm here to talk to you guys about whether the Browns should have stuck with Baker Mayfield instead of shipping him off for Deshaun Watson. And of course, like most of my videos, this one was inspired by the wonderful world of the social media platform X, where I saw this tweet. It was a quote tweet. The original tweet from John said maybe the Browns should have kept Baker Mayfield over Deshaun Watson. The quote tweeter said he requested a trade. Two other teams moved on from him after us, referring to the Browns, of course. He plays good against bad teams. Please move on. So, because we're having this discussion on X is exactly why I am doing this video, because I guess there is a debate about it. So I just like to go back and review everything that has happened. I feel like this is a good time to go over this because we just saw Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers take on and beat the Philadelphia Eagles, moving on to the divisional round where the Browns, granted, they were heavily injured throughout the season and had their basically backup second string, third string quarterback in and still winning games. They lost in the end to CJ Stroud. Okay, so let's take it back to the Watson situation in the first place. Baker Mayfield had two great seasons, amazing seasons as a Cleveland Brown, and two absolutely horrific seasons with the Cleveland Brown. Those two horrific seasons, season with Freddie Kitchens, and his second bad season was when he broke his shoulder. In that season, he was second place in completion percentage at the time of him actually fracturing his non-throwing shoulder and being incredibly inaccurate for the rest of the season. Shoulder injuries, obviously a hot topic for the current Cleveland Browns quarterback, Deshaun Watson. Baker Mayfield's two amazing seasons came in his rookie year with Hugh Jackson, where he broke the rookie passing touchdown record for the NFL, and his third season, his first season with Coach Stefanski, where Coach Stefanski won Head Coach of the Year, probably for the first time, probably going to win again this season, if I had to guess. And Baker Mayfield beat Pittsburgh in the playoffs, and then went to Kansas City and was a fumble through the end zone away from potentially beating the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes for most of the game. Henny came in because I believe Myles Garrett choke slammed him, and Mahomes was knocked out for the game. Deshaun, during that whole time, hadn't played in one whole season with the Houston Texans, basically was benched for the season because of the allegations against him for the massage therapists that had a class action lawsuit essentially against him. Not actually a class action, but essentially all sued him at the same time with the same lawyer. At that time, the Browns decided to trade several draft picks for Deshaun Watson and sign him to a fully guaranteed record-breaking contract at the time. During this trade negotiation that was very public, Baker Mayfield requested a trade from the team, may having a lot to do with Coach Stefanski and his deteriorating relationship. I think some of us might remember Baker Mayfield. He was known to be compromised. He played for the whole season. He didn't sit out until the very end. His last game with the Browns before they were eliminated from the playoffs, Coach Stefanski had him throw the ball 50, 60 times in that game as kind of like a F you to Baker Mayfield. Why don't you get off my team? Trying to make him look bad, trying to slander Baker Mayfield because they know he is compromised right now. So we're going to make him look bad so we can move on from him. Is basically what happened from my point of view. I say that because he had reason to ask for a trade or ask for his release. It wasn't out of the blue entirely. It was, I think, understandable from where Baker Mayfield was coming from at the time. After Watson was acquired, he was suspended for the majority of the season, even though the Cleveland Browns organization insisted they did their due diligence on Deshaun and his legal cases, and they felt comfortable bringing that sort of guy into the locker room. And when Deshaun came back in, he was unable to outperform Jacoby Brissett, essentially the operating starting quarterback for the majority of that Cleveland Browns season. Which brings us to the 2023 season, the season that we are currently watching the playoffs of as I'm recording this video. Watson had a slew of shoulder injuries, one ending his season. And Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers have gone on to clinch the division, a home playoff game where they hosted the Eagles, and they beat the Eagles in incredible fashion. And in this season, Baker Mayfield has been the 12th best quarterback in terms of QB rating. He played all 17 games where he won the division despite a 9-8 record, threw for 4,044 yards, 7.1 yards an attempt, 28 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Now let's compare that to Deshaun Watson's season in 2023, where Deshaun, who is virtually the same age, they're separated by about 200 days, played in only 6 games, had a great record with the help of Nick Chubb and a dominant offensive line that was healthy at the time, with the help of a dominant defense that was much more dominant in the beginning of the season than it was in the end of the season and the postseason. Let's be honest. He threw for, he played limited games, but look at this, 6.5 yards per attempt versus Baker Mayfield, 7.1, significantly different. Only 7 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, which looks much worse than Baker Mayfield's stat line. So going back to this tweet, he requested a trade. Did he request a trade? Yes. Did he have reason to? Yes. Was Deshaun Watson already coming in? Yes. So that's pretty disingenuous to make it sound like Baker Mayfield was the bad guy in this situation. 2 others moved on from him after us. So he's talking about Carolina Panthers. We're seeing how first overall pick Bryce Young is faring for the Carolina Panthers this season. We saw him go to the Rams and perform actually very, very well, win some games for them on very, very short notice, where he really demonstrated how smart he was and how quickly he takes down information, downloads, and is able to apply it on a football field. And we all know that he filled in for an injured Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford was the starting quarterback next season, no matter what, just end stop. That's just the end of the story there in LA. He goes to the Buccaneers. Buccaneers want him. Buccaneers are a good football team. And he goes on and wins the division. Plays good against bad teams. We already talked about how he's 2-1 in the playoffs and probably deserved to win at Kansas City in his junior year in the NFL. Please move on. And I don't think that's fair to move on, because in conclusion, we're doing this to kind of judge how the organization is operating. And I think guys like him, in my opinion, give Cleveland Browns fans a really, really bad name, because they can't just accept that their organization messed up and Baker Mayfield really was the guy. And despite that, have had a lot of success, because at the end of the day, the best of the best, GM, head coach, Bill Belichick, made a ton of mistakes. And that's the reason a lot of those mistakes towards the end of his career were the reason that him and the Patriots are no longer a couple anymore. They broke up. I think the only argument a Deshaun Watson backing Browns fan can make about the situation is Watson next season is going to come out and just be the superstar that we saw him be 4 or 5 years ago. That could happen. That is a possibility. Stranger things have happened in the NFL. However, in my opinion, I don't think anybody with any football knowledge whatsoever can argue that Texans did not absolutely fleece the Browns on this trade. With those draft picks they acquired from the Browns, they got Will Anderson and they got Tank Dell. If you don't know who those 2 guys are, they're absolutely spectacular, incredible players. Clearly, the guy tweeting this did not know who these people are. To boot, the Texans have this season's first-round draft pick for the Browns still. So they're not done with these draft assets that they acquired from the Browns, while the Browns overpaid, arguably, definitely, for Deshaun Watson. They could punt on this last first-round draft pick that they have in this trade, and they would still have dominated the trade. And I believe will go forward to demonstrate that they dominated this trade with the Cleveland Browns. Even if they literally draft a punter with that first pick, I think the Texans are going to come out on top. And this is not all to say that I think Stefanski and Andrew Berry should be fired. We knew going into their careers with the Cleveland Browns that they're going to be new to the position and there might be some growing pains along the way. And if we can learn from our mistakes as a head coach, as a GM, and grow from it, that's a really, really great sign. If we keep making the same mistakes over and over again, and it keeps on compiling into mediocrity, then I think that is something to be aware of starting right now as a Cleveland Brown. Andrew Berry kind of botched this situation. Stefanski may have been involved and may have actively forced Baker Mayfield out the door. I think that demonstrates poor leadership from Coach Stefanski and poor planning from Andrew Berry, because if he would have just been patient and just had Jacoby Brissett on the team all season and just rode with him, for example, maybe they make it to the playoffs. Maybe they don't, because when Deshaun Watson came in, they were still not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. They would have had an opportunity the following season because there was a lot of available quarterbacks, particularly Aaron Rodgers, who was available and maybe doesn't tear his Achilles on the 5th play of the season playing behind that Browns offensive line. Who knows? There were other options at the time, too, that you could have acquired, that you could have traded for fewer assets that I think would have been better options the following season if you did, in fact, want to move on from Baker Mayfield, or you had to move on for Baker Mayfield because your head coach and your starting quarterback do not get along and you're going to side with your new head coach over your franchise quarterback who you didn't draft. And I'm also not saying that I think Baker Mayfield is going to go on a Super Bowl run right now. I am recording this after the wild card round. We're going into the divisional round. Baker Mayfield is going into Detroit and playing the red-hot Detroit Lions. I'm not saying that he's going to make a Super Bowl run. He'll be Super Bowl MVP. I'm not like pounding my chest on that, even though I think it would be awesome if he did. It's definitely possible that he did. But I'm probably on the gambling podcast that will be released Thursday night, will be recommending the Lions to cover that spread and beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not just because Baker Mayfield, by the way, just because I think as a whole team, the Lions are going to have a little bit more of an edge, especially at home. So tune in for my take on that and my recommendations gambling-wise on that. And tell me what you think. Whose fault is it? Are you on the side of Deshaun Watson? Are you on the side of Baker Mayfield? Do you think there should be consequences for the coaching staff and general managing staff for this blunder? Or do you think it's just part of the game? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You just got to come out on top more than you come out on bottom. You're going to get got, but you got to get yours more than you get got, though. Something like that. Thank you, guys. Please subscribe to the channel. Good night.